Hello, I'm Shelly Reef, Sunny Sailor with today's cruise news. And each day I'm going to share a real life story of how God used different types of sailing vessels to make a big difference for Him. So let's get underway and see how a small steamboat, the Morningstar, set sail from up in Michigan and headed down to Vicksburg, Mississippi. Edson White had a love for all people, and he had a special burden to make sure everyone got a chance to know about Jesus. He began to pray to God, and he asked how he could make waves for Jesus. God answered his prayer by showing him the needs of a group of black people down in the South. Edson felt a strong burden to try and meet their needs. Edson got his friend Will Palmer, and the two of them began to plan how they could go south to reach the people. They prayed together and came across a little paper Edson's mother, Ellen White, had written explaining that Christians must love and serve all people. Her paper said that the black man's name is written in the book of life beside the white man's. All are one in Christ. Edson knew that God was calling him to head south, but what would he do when he got there? After more prayer, Edson and Will decided to build a steamboat which could carry them down the Mississippi River. This steamboat could serve many purposes. It would be their office, a printing press, classroom, and a church. His plan was to print books that could help African Americans learn to read and teach them stories from the Bible. After a short time, Edson and his steamboat were ready to set sail. They named their new boat the Morningstar. The Morningstar began its journey up in Michigan, floating down the Kalamazoo River to Sagatuck. Then it was time to sail across Lake Michigan. On their trip across the lake, there was a terrible storm. The Morningstar was tossed back and forth for 14 hours. Edson and his crew did all they could to keep that boat afloat, and God was with that little steamboat. It was only by the power of God that their little boat was saved. This missionary trip in the South wasn't going to be easy for Edson. Slavery had officially ended, but there were still many prejudiced people in the South who did not like black people, whose skin was different than theirs. If anyone tried to open a new school or church for African Americans, the building was usually set on fire. One man trying to help had to jump from a moving train because a group of people had gathered to kill him when they heard that he was trying to help African Americans. Another was whipped and his wife shot at just because they wanted to teach the black people in the South. But this did not stop Edson and Will. When they first landed in Vicksburg, Mississippi, their first job was to build a church. They began to work, but soon realized they needed a building permit from the city. Will went into town to apply for one, but the permit man refused to give it when he learned what the permit was for. Will talked with him, and finally the man changed his mind and said he would give the permit if they could find two neighbors who would agree with the project. With God's help, Edson and Will found two neighbors, and they continued to build. There wasn't much money for building, but other wonderful Christian people heard about what was happening and donated funds to help. As people learned about this new church in Vicksburg, others began to build churches in the South as well. Edson and Will had started something wonderful. They were truly making waves for Jesus. Edson White created a group called the Southern Missionary Society. This group's goal was to educate the people of the South. His influence helped create a food company, a hospital, and 28 Adventist mission schools, with a total of 1,000 students. God used Edson White and his little steamboat, the Morningstar, to do a mighty work for him. I wonder how God is planning to use all of you as his little missionaries. I guess we will just have to wait and see. That's all for today's story. I'm Shelly Reeves, Sunny Sailor, and this has been Cruise News. See you tomorrow.